Hey, I'm Bill. This is Vital Bike Chains. Got a story to tell. It's sort of a PSA service announcement regarding Masterlinks. So I have a neighbor that purchased a bike a long time ago, and it was like one of the first chains I ever did. And it came back with a broken Masterlink. So I'm gonna tell you the story about that. Meanwhile, I wonder what's up with this shoe. And so here's the bike. It's a Specialized Fuse, which I don't think I'd name a bike Fuse, like it's ready to explode. But anyways, he bought the bike a few years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I bought it used, well used. However, I did take the chain off, check it out, cleaned it, waxed it, put it back on, and for 4 years had no issue. Then all of a sudden one day he says, "Oh, I broke the chain on my Specialized Fuse." And I said, "Well, what were you doing?" And he said, I was between gears and I went to take off after the dog and pop. And so I picked out the SRAM GX Eagle chain to replace this chain. And you know, it's a bike that isn't gonna be in any sort of competition. So I decided also to use the double endurance blend of the Silka Wax. Luckily he brought over the old chain, which I'll talk about in a minute here, but I could just line up the chains and cut the chain to the size. Now the chain breaker that I use, it's really cheap. It's one I just keep in the garage. It's not the Park Tool one that I bring with me in my toolbox. And I've used this at least a dozen times and it's really got no issue. Anytime somebody brings a bicycle to my house, it's really a blessing because it gives me a chance to maybe try something new and see how it works. You know, just get my hands on things. So in this scenario, I didn't run this wax chain through the machine in the shop that kind of articulates and frees up the links. I was like, well, let's just do this by hand, which somebody waxing at home might do. And then I can fit it on the bike and see how it shifts, you know, firsthand. So this is great. So now the chain's pretty much on. I use one of those little wire things to hold the chain for you so you can get the Masterlink on. And here's kind of PSA number 1 is make sure you get your Masterlink in the right direction. Now, I'm putting the Masterlink on the bottom side of the chain, right? So it may look like this arrow on the Masterlink's going the wrong way, but it is going in the correct direction that the chain normally rotates in. Again, these Masterlink pliers, they're really cheap. Again, I keep them in the garage. I have a pair of Super Bees that go with me in the toolbox when I take tools places. But these, again, I've used a bunch of times. There's really nothing wrong with them. They were, I don't know, $5. PSA number 2, if you wax your chain and or your Masterlink, just make sure you get that sucker like really squished together before you pop the Masterlink back into place. Then give it a good feel and a good visual. Make sure that everything is lined up just right before you start cranking on it. Now to the old chain. So yeah, the Masterlink failed. And here's PSA number 3. And that is, if you have purchased a used bike and maybe the chain checks out, like it's within spec by a long shot, I don't know, maybe just go ahead and replace that Masterlink. You don't know how many times it's been off and on. And sometimes just looking at the Masterlink, it just gives me a bad feeling of putting it back on, so I'll go ahead and replace it. A quick search online and the SRAM Eagle Masterlink is like $4.50. Here we are all finished up with the chain. You can see that I've rotated the chain so the Masterlink's on the top side, and yes, the arrow is facing in the direction that the chain rotates. So while I have the bike, I'll just give it a quick check through. I'll say the owner isn't great about maintenance. Basically, if they need to put a wrench on the bike, it comes to my house. At first I thought the rear brake needed to be bled, but it turns out it's really just some really worn pads. The hydraulics of it is fine. The barely loose headset that you really can't see in this video, but you can feel it. You put your hand up there on the kind of where the spacers are. Kind of a weird scenario here. I've never seen a plastic cap before, and I guess there's probably a good reason why. So check out the gap between the cap and the stem. Not that it being plastic is the cause of this, but when you try and tighten this cap down, it never really feels tight. All you're doing is like flexing the plastic. When I took the cap off, I noticed two things. One, it's cracked, probably because you keep trying to tighten it, and eventually something's got to give. The second thing is you can see like a tiny little ring of like silver around the bottom of the cap, like here, 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 here. And what it is this cap's just bottoming out on the fork. So it really needs a spacer. I ended up finding another cap that actually fit better, and it was made out of this material called metal, and it just seemed to work just fine. Finally, I had a pair of grips that would fit these lock collars, so put those on and took it for a little ride. Down the street, shifted up through the gears, shifted down through the gears. Everything seemed to shift just fine. And so here's with me my final test ride after I fixed the headset and all that stuff. And I'm glad I didn't run over my camera here. So hopefully you got something out of this when it comes to buying a used bike with a chain that appears to be good. Maybe just go ahead and replace that master link. It's definitely a lesson I'll take to heart. Well, thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you next time.